Welcome everyone to the second of a series of 5 in the pre-learning series in preparation for the 2024 WSSDA General Assembly. I am your Director of Strategic Advocacy, Marissa Rathbone. Before we get started, just wanted to make sure you were aware that we are recording this presentation, as we are for all 5 of these webinars, in the case that some of your fellows aren't able to make it at the noon hour. But for those of you that are here, very grateful that you're spending your time with us. Hope that you're able to stay for the duration, but if not, you can rest assured that this will be recorded and you can watch whatever you miss later. In the meantime, if you wouldn't mind putting your information in the chat. When you enter information in the chat, your name will automatically be associated, so you don't need to enter that. But if you could please indicate the school district that you represent as a board member, and then if you are the voting delegate, so you could just put Quincy School Board voting delegate or Quincy School Board board member here to listen and learn. So either are great, and we are welcoming all of you, but particularly want to drive home the importance of ensuring that each school board has identified and registered their voting delegate for General Assembly this year, which will commence 2 weeks from tomorrow. I can hardly believe we've already made it through a year and we're almost there again. So thanks again for your interest. The way that we've organized these webinars is by position category. So if you're not already familiar with the WSSDA position platform, on the WSSDA website, there is a catalog that lists all 225 permanent and legislative positions that have been previously adopted by school directors over the course of time since we've had a general or legislative assembly. Those positions are expansive. They address a variety of issues, and in order to make them a little simpler to understand or organize, they have been organized by categories. On Tuesday, we talked about school construction as well as association operations. And then today, we are addressing the issues of governance. In the governance section of the General Assembly Handbook, which starts on page 81, I'm going to go ahead and stop share of our agenda for today and pull up the handbook. I just wanted to draw your attention to page 81, which is the start of the section that lists the position proposals under the governance category. And this year, there are 19 total position proposals under the issue of governance. And some of those position proposals are duplicative in terms of subject area. So we have several on parental rights, several on local control. And then we also have a handful of new position proposals, including one on disaggregated data. So in the course of an hour, we won't be able to talk about all of the distinct topic areas within this proposal category. However, I have invited 2 guest speakers who are experts in the area of either data aggregation, and that is Jennifer Priddy from ESD 113, and then Barbara Soots, who is a longstanding advocate around curriculum design and selection, and has an amazing toolkit that school boards can utilize readily in order to make local decisions about curriculum selection. So she's going to walk you through that. And then I'm going to be sandwiched in the middle of both of them and talk a little bit about existing laws that address parental rights in the public education system. So I'm going to bring back that agenda just real fast so you can kind of see how things are organized for the day. And let you know that when Jennifer and myself and Barbara are all presenting, that you are welcome to ask questions in the chat because we didn't know how many folks would show up to this in order to make sure we made the best use of the 60 minutes we have. Most easy to filter through the questions in the chat. I will do that at the conclusion of each of our presentations and get to as many questions as possible. If any questions are unanswered, we'll be sure to get answers to those questions out to the body following the closing of this webinar. So with that, in the interest of time, I want to be sure to honor the commitments and planning from both Jennifer and Barbara. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our first presenter, Jennifer Priddy, who is the Associate Superintendent of Business and Operations at the Educational Service District 113, and who I work with even more closely during the legislative session, who provides really pertinent, relevant, and necessary information data that helps to inform our advocacy work, both during session and throughout the year, and who is a known expert in the area of data analysis and data-driven decision-making. So Jennifer, thank you so much for being here. I've already given you co-host capabilities, so I'm gonna let you take the figurative mic and let us know what we need to know.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here and appreciate the opportunity. Let me make sure you can see my PowerPoint. Okay, looks like you can. All right, well, I'm going to get started and try not to speed talk because there's a lot to cover, but because I want to leave time for questions, I'll get right into it. So my first, I was asked to discuss data informed decision making for school boards. And so want to start with just why to use data and then what is available to you. So we'll start with the why. I think boards are making decisions that have a very long-term impact. And so even a decision that seems cheap at the beginning can become very expensive in the long run. There also decisions are hard to undo because there's a constituency that is really invested in a particular decision. Also, districts have much smaller financial margins to afford to pilot as much as they used to pilot or to learn as they proceeded. I think finally, data helps ensure that decisions are not a personal preference, and data give confidence to the decision that the board is making. And confidence in public education is so important. Finally, I think you make your district better when you model best practices with establishing that the expectation that decisions will be made using data. And I think there is all kinds of data, and we want to make sure that we recognize that and use the full spectrum of data that's available to us. From a qualitative basis, surveys and testimonials are terribly important to school boards. Also, use data. How much is a particular service being used in the district? I think another type of data that is important is what is the programming that is available in the district. And in programming, I include professional development. What is the professional development that teachers are investing their time in? And finally, I think that identifying changes over time in a program is very important qualitative information that then informs what's the next set of data that would be important to this issue. From a quantitative data perspective, our state has such rich quantitative data. All districts report their expenditures and all of their staffing in the same structure year after year. And that gives us the ability to compare ourselves to peer districts or to look at how we were spending money or deploying staff in prior years. As you know, board members approve all expenditures. So once you understand your account coding structure for vouchers, you will also understand what data is available in your district. And that's very powerful. I think that it's good to consider whether data should be normed on a per student basis for comparisons to prior years. So for example, if a district spent $200,000 on XYZ program 3 years ago and is still spending $200,000, I think there's a important question about whether or not that $200,000 covers the same number of students, because not only has the rate of inflation changed, and so the buying power of the $200,000 is different than 3 or 5 years ago, it's also covering a different number of students. Finally, it's important to identify whether or not you want data to be disaggregated by other factors such as race and ethnicity or language or income, and establish norms within your district for what you're going to focus on, what's important to your board. So in terms of what expenditure data or what quantitative data is available, we'll start with expenditure and revenue. All expenditure data is available by program, so basic ed or special education or career and technical education. By activity, so examples are, in that program, did you buy curriculum? Did you buy professional development? Did you deploy certificated staff, or did you deploy classified staff? And then by object, so did you buy salaries and benefits, or did you use the money for travel and equipment? And a quick example is I pulled this data from the F-196, and that is your annual report on your expenditures. It tells you how much money was provided to the program, so your revenue for the transitional bilingual program, and then how much overall was spent, and then how was it spent? Was it spent on certificated salaries, which is column 2, or was it spent on classified salaries, which is column 3? And then within those categories, was it spent on professional development or curriculum, that type of thing. So a really very rich data for expenditures and even revenue. I think one of the factors that, as you think about what decisions you're going to use, what data is relevant to the decisions you're going to make, we always have to think about what are the distorting items. And ESSER funding is a distorting items. And for many years, we're going to be having to filter all of this information. Like, did we spend as much money on the transition? Did we spend as much money in the transitional bilingual program in these years that we would have spent if we didn't have ESSER money? Better way to frame that is, did we spend ESSER money on the bilingual program? And that ESSER money doesn't show up on this report unless you go to another section of the report. So I went out of order, but we'll just go with the flow. This is the staffing display. Our state has such rich data on staffing, it was hard for me to find an artifact to show you. Ultimately, what I identified is such a narrow slice, but you can see in this report, it's called the 1801 report, how many staff are deployed for Program 21, which is special education, both instructional and administrative, and then the same for the CTE program, instructional and administrative. And then you can also see, as a little example, that you can also see how much the district spent in those categories, how much the district spent per person, and then that's for base salary, and then how much the district spent for other salary, which is stipends or additional time, and what that averaged out to on a per person basis. You can, in this same report, you can see it's identifying your instructional staff by grade, and it's identifying your staff instructional versus administrative. That's just a small example of the richness of the staffing data that we have in our state. And then finally, as an example, student achievement, there was no artifact that I could pick, because when I went to the OSPI website to find an artifact, I was so overwhelmed by how much data there was. I just decided to give you the website link because this website is very rich. And then as I was kind of waiting for this PowerPoint or this meeting to start, I thought, oh, let me look on the daily e-clippings from WSSDA. And there's an article today on how the Stanwood Camino School District is using data for student achievement decisions, which I thought was an excellent example. So you can go find that and see that for yourself. So how do you start the process? I think there's two cautions I have for you. First is that data takes time, and you really need to give your superintendent warning that you're interested in X, Y, or Z data. Are there study sessions that are coming up that you can give the a heads up to the superintendent and administration? Are there upcoming board decisions that would benefit from data? And if you find a good display of data that maybe you find from another school districts, give it to the superintendent, because that reduces the Easter egg hunt that they will have to be on to give you what you need. And then identify what you want and methodically ramp up to that. I think every school district has very thin administration in the central office now. Data goes to the bottom of the to-do list. You want to pull that up to the top or near the top, but that takes time and warning. But also know from a board of directors perspective, it takes time on your part also. You have to know that it's going to take you time to review and digest the data and then form conclusions. I worked with a school district this summer, gave them an immense amount of data on their finances, but they didn't have time to absorb it and use it with authority. And that was a real mistake on my part, that I didn't think to have them build that in. I would encourage the use of technology. If this is a direction you want your district to go, make sure that your staff have good tools for online surveys, analysis, and even use AI. Let me go back up to online surveys. When you start to want to use data, you're going to want to disaggregate that data, it would be best if, as a school board, you identified a common set of disaggregating factors that you want to have used for all future surveys. Do you care about income? Do you care about language? Do you care about ethnicity? Identify as a group what's important to you, and then your administration can use that one set on all of the surveys that they do. And I think you should all just go take a survey on the Olympia School District website, because they have a really great starting set of questions that you can just steal. The communications department did an amazing job. And it's a good example of how you can then use that across all of the surveys that you conduct. So how does data connect to a strategic plan? I think the first thing is that disaggregation question. Remember, a strategic plan spans several years, and so you have to ask yourself what time frame makes sense to analyze and build your data reporting expectations over time, so that you are not flooded with information as you start, but you can take some time to really build great data. Identify a mix of qualitative and quantitative, because the quantitative is so rich. And then mine your sources. Don't start from scratch. There's too much out there for you already. And then finally, remember, change in an outcome takes time. So you're going to have to review data for several years to see whether or not a program has impact. And then where long-term data exists, make sure you start to compare data where it makes sense as a starting point and an ending point. I was just looking at levy data and pulled all the data for the 18-19 year, which was the complete wrong year to pull, because the policy changed in 18-19. I needed to start in 17-18 to understand the impact of the change. Consistency. If data is always built into your decision making, there's no surprise when a board uses data to understand a policy disagreement. And then finally, my personal plea is that you understand the state prototypical funding model. It's detailed for a reason. The purpose of that detail is that we can use it to inform decision making. So, for example, how much is the state giving your school district for utilities and insurance, and how much are you spending? The gap that we have right now in our system is really important to make sure we can share when it's relevant to share. And that is all I have. Welcome any questions.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I really appreciate it. If any of you have questions, if you would please type them in the chat. I'm going to ask a couple myself, and that'll give you all some time to think. If there's anything you'd like to know, just as a note, within the governance section of the General Assembly Handbook, there is one new position proposal around disaggregated data, and this information that Jennifer just shared might help to inform the way you think about that position proposal. But really, even when data isn't specifically mentioned in policy proposals from the legislature or in our own positions, whether they're permanent or legislative in nature, data is underlying or should be underlying in all of the decisions that we're making. And so one of the things that I notice in working with the state legislature, you've probably noticed this too, is that oftentimes our legislators expect of school districts that once a policy has been passed or enacted as law, they oftentimes the next year want to see what the results are. And we continuously, myself, Jennifer, other education advocates, continuously remind our legislators it takes time for a policy to be implemented to show its true effects. And so I really wanted Jennifer to also drive that message home with all of you as it relates to looking at data at the local level and making decisions around strategic planning and strategic direction of your school district, that it takes time for policy or a practice or a program or a curriculum once adopted and implemented to really show its effects. And with that, I would ask Jennifer, is there like a minimum number of years that you would generally recommend that a school board be looking at data before making substantive changes to a policy or program? Is there a best practice in the field that you have heard or could share?
I don't know of a best practice. I default to 5 years, but I think the bigger issue is what was the start year and what is the end year. So the end year is always the most recent year, I think, that you have. And the starting year, if that's 6 years because of that policy change, that's really how many you have to make sure that you have a starting point before the policy change, and then as many years as possible after the policy change. And
Great.
so that's my example about the levy. The change in levies was irrelevant if I started with the 18-19 years. So
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. So just to reiterate, I think one of the numbers I heard you say is while start and end year are important, also if you have a program that's continuously being implemented, that you're taking a look at it for 5 years potentially before making sweeping changes. A lot of the programs that you all have staff that are implementing have been in place for a long time or are brand new and need some time to be implemented. So if you don't see results after 2 years of implementation, or you don't like the results that you see, give it a little more time before making sweeping changes, because the implementers, the practitioners, need some time to get practice, get it under their belt a little bit, and have the opportunity to show some change. So a good reminder to all of us. A couple questions in the queue. One for you, Jennifer. Are the S-275 reports publicly available? And if so, how might they find them?
So it is publicly available. It's on the OSPI website, and it is it's a report called the 1801 report. I didn't put the website link in my PowerPoint that I already sent to you, but I'm just going to redo that. I'll add the link into the PowerPoint slide. I'll send you a new PDF. I assume you're posting that somewhere.
We sure are. Yeah, we'll share it out.
I'll give you a link to both the F-196 and to the 1801.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And then the other question actually is for me about whether or not we're going to make these publicly available? And the answer to that question is yes. All of these webinars will be recorded and posted to the WSSDA YouTube channel, and then any of the supporting materials will also be included on the WSSDA website under the General Assembly page. So we will refresh a new version of this when Jennifer adds that link, but it's also available there in the chat. Thanks, Lisa, for putting that in. I think that's all the questions I see in the chat. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here. This is a conversation we should have regularly, not just for 15 minutes before a major event. So hope that we can continue to utilize your expertise and messaging as we approach a brand new school year. So exciting time and a legislative session ahead. So thanks again, Jennifer. Really appreciate it. Great. So the next section of time will be on parental rights. Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind closing your screen so I can take back the controls. You all may be privy to this really amazing resource that was developed during a legislative session by legislative staff, curating all of the existing laws that are currently in the revised Code of Washington, already enacted law that requires or suggests that school districts engage with parents, families, and community members in a variety of different areas. And so because it is such an important conversation, we have several WSSDA member adopted positions around parental involvement, community engagement, parental access, and some suggested revisions or additions to the platform to increase or change parental rights or access. Wanted to just help you all get a sense for what's already in place as you think about what else is necessary. So I'm going to show you this resource. I'm going to put it in the chat. So in case you want to follow along on your own, we also reviewed some of this in previous legislative sessions. It was released in, I believe, 2022, prior to that legislative session. I'm messing with various things on my screen here. Please hold tight. So this may be information that you have already seen, but it doesn't help to review it, especially because there is so much content in there. My guess is that nobody's read this from start to finish, including myself, although I have skimmed it thoroughly. So pull it up onto the screen because there are a couple things I just want to point out. We're not going to go through the entire document because that would be tedious and none of us have that kind of time, but I definitely wanted to draw your attention to a few things. So it's actually strangely named the K-12 Parents Bill of Rights. It's actually not a bill at all. This is a document that basically collects or curates all of the current laws and statutes, as well as model policies that address any issue related to parental, family, community rights, access, or engagement. So it is a big, big document. In fact, let's see, I'm looking at my paper copy here. It's about 70 pages long. So it is content heavy, but it is organized in such a way that hopefully if there's something specifically you're looking for, you would be able to find it. Also, a keyword search is always your friend. If you're looking for something specific, when you have a copy of this, you can do a find, and that would allow you to actually look for something specific. Find text or tools as a PDF. You can go in there and type in a keyword. So I'm just going to scroll through to orient you to what's in here. You will note that included are references for parents and guardians on existing statute, rule, model policy, and procedure. So that includes WSSDA's model policies and procedures as it relates to parent, community, family engagement, and involvement. And then other existing systems and ways in which school districts are expected to or encouraged to communicate information to parents and guardians. So paying attention to the verbs in this document will be important, because in some cases it says requires, in some cases it says allows, in some cases it says encourages or recommends. Sometimes it says must, sometimes it says may. All of those words are very, very important. But just noting that it is an extensive document, so parent engagement is certainly something that has been heavily considered by our state legislature and is certainly expected of our public education system in terms of engaging parents, guardians, and families in decisions that are being made at the local levels. So I'm going to just move you to page 6 to start. Sorry for any dizziness. So this is the beginning of the listing, and they are organized by grouping. So this particular grouping is in enrollment options. And so may not be of particular interest to you as it relates specifically to General Assembly or WSSDA advocacy work, but just for the sake of illuminating how this is organized, I thought it would be helpful for you to see that for each of the existing laws on the books, there is a statutory reference, and if you actually Googled RCW 28A.225.010, it would take you to the actual RCW and allow you to navigate and actually see more of the content around this. So this is summary information so that it's a little bit more digestible. But if you wanted further information, it's certainly there. So it will reference the RCWs around the particular topic area, which is listed in the middle, and any model policy that has been developed by WSSDA to support a school board's consideration and implementation of the state law. So just another reminder that WSSDA as an organization creates model policies firmly grounded in the state or federal laws. There's no zhuzhing of what the law says or does. And it is a school district's prerogative to adopt that model policy or not. You are not required to adopt WSSDA's model policy. In fact, you could actually adopt your own policy if you have lawyers on staff who can help you navigate the laws. One of the reasons I understand school boards subscribe to the model policy subscription services is that they may not have the time or resources with their current lawyer or lawyers on staff to develop their own policies. So this is an option for you all to help support your work. So if there is a model policy as it relates to the adopted law, it will be named here, and you can access that through your subscription services. So just noting this one, it's about mandatory attendance. And like I said, pay attention to the verbs. In this particular situation, the RCW requires parents of any child ages 8 to 18 to cause their child to attend public school unless the child is attending private school. So basically, this document, anytime parent is referenced in state statute, whether it's the parent is required or the school is required, you will find it here in this document. So again, it is comprehensive. So you'll see these are first two are requirements of parents. Then you see a requirement of the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction to distribute information outlining parent and guardian options, and that would be for OSPI to develop and for schools potentially to distribute. Requires school districts to annually inform parents of the districts or intra-districts and inter-district enrollment options. Might direct the superintendent to provide information to parents, students, and staff. So again, the devil in the details here. Please be sure you're reading what the verb is it requires, who it requires, and what to be done. So all of that is in here, but parents are interspersed throughout. So the next page, I just want to draw your attention to some of the issue areas that I know are of particular importance to you all right now, at least in terms of what I know. Again, charter school closures might be important to you, non-resident students, children of military families, all of this is really important stuff. So I don't mean to minimize anything specifically, but I want to go to some of the areas I think you might be most interested in. And I'm going to go to page 18 in this case. And in this particular situation, it is related to required parent involvement. Sorry, Tim, our former executive director, just walked by, so I was a little distracted. Okay, so I am looking at this one, model policy and procedure. So you'll actually see that in place is a model policy and procedure 4129 on family involvement based on either law or best practice. And in this case, it encourages and supports family involvement in education at home, in schools, communities, and school governance, recognizes the diversity of family structures, and directs the implementation of a family involvement plan. So that family involvement plan would be at the local level. So sometimes the language in the law requires school boards to do things. And so I wanted to draw your attention to page 19, where here under Model Policy 0100, under planning processes, provides that school boards will ensure district transparency through processes that are open and accountable and include collaboration with families and community members. Now you may be thinking, well, that's pretty vague, and it is indeed, but it's certainly a conversation at the school board level that you all should be having periodically or at a particular junction throughout the year, and addressing details that are laid out in the rest of this document. It also explains that parent and community representatives will be part of the planning team that develops the school district's vision, mission, and beliefs. So if you are here and just hearing this for the first time, please note that as your board considers any changes or development around its vision, mission, and belief statements, there should be parent and community representatives that are part of the planning team that develops those. So that's laid out in law and also in Model Policy 0100. Then I am going to scroll to page 22. Again, there's so much good stuff in here. I just don't have time to go through all of it. So I apologize if I'm brushing by something that's of particular importance to you. Here on page 22, Instructional Materials Committee. This is sort of a foundation set up for the next part of our webinar with Barbara Soots on curriculum design and selection. In this section, I wanted you to note that the RCW previously said that parents were allowed to serve on Instructional Materials Committee. And actually, because this document hasn't been updated since the last legislative session, there was a law enacted during the 2024 legislative session that requires school boards to appoint at least one parent to serve on any of the instructional materials committees that are assembled by the school board. So a parent must actually be a parent of a student in the district, must be involved in the instructional materials committee going forward. So previously the verb was allow. Now, as this document is updated, it should say requires. Moving on to other requirements, school districts' board of directors are required to evaluate teaching materials in a public hearing whenever there is a complaint by parent, guardian, or custodians. If they consider something to be objectionable. It also, in statute already, requires that all instructional materials, including supplemental materials and teacher manuals, used with survey, analysis, or evaluation in program or project supported by federal funds to be available for inspection by parents and guardians. Many school districts do this already, even outside of state law, with any of their materials, make it readily available. But in some cases, it is required that upon concern or complaint, that those materials be made readily available. And then also wanted to point to here that school districts provide parents and adult or emancipated minor students written notice of this policy and procedure and offer them the opportunity to opt their children or themselves out of participating in the surveys, activities that collect personal information, and non-emergency examinations or screenings. So I am close to being over my time. I just wanted to do one more because I know for many of you this is particularly important from a variety of different perspectives, but in RCW 28A 300-475, as it relates to sexual health education, currently the law requires that parents be notified that schools will be providing comprehensive sex ed and provide parents electronic access to the course materials. Allows parents to request to review the materials, and specifies that school districts will involve parents and community groups in the planning, development, and evaluation. So there's many more pages. There are many things I didn't get a chance to particularly address, but what I really wanted to illuminate in resharing this particular resource is that there are many laws already currently on the books as it relates to parent rights and involvement. Some of that is implemented differently at the local level. And so what I would encourage you as school board members to do is to take this resource, share it with your superintendent as well as your fellows, and ensure that particularly where there's school board responsibility, that you are aware of that and adhering to the law, and where there is district responsibility, that you understand how the school district is enacting or adhering to the state laws that have required parental involvement already. So I believe probably some of you asked me some questions. In the interest of time, I'm going to pass this on to Barbara Soots, who's going to talk more about some of the tools and resources that have been developed by OSPI to help you navigate some of the local decision making. And then towards the end of this webinar, she and I can field some of the questions that have come forward for both of us. So with that, Barbara, thank you for being here and for all your work. I'm going to mute myself and let you take it from here.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Marissa, just thank you very much. Well, thank you for allowing me to join you this afternoon and present a little bit of information. I know that I have just a short amount of time, so I'm just going to be touching on this topic lightly and at a high level, but please know that you are always welcome to contact me with any additional questions, and I will be happy to go into greater detail. So for the next few minutes, I am going to show you some screenshots of the OSPI course design and instructional materials toolkit. And I also want to touch briefly on the upcoming school board policy changes that are going to be looking forward to the 25-26 school year that Marissa has already touched on as they relate to instructional materials policy, and also mention a few opportunities that you may be interested in as well. So just to kick us off, a point of clarification, you'll notice that throughout our instructional materials toolkit, we refer to course design. And that is pretty much because there is absolutely no consensus on the word curriculum. It is thrown around in all different ways, all over the place, by the legislature, by OSPI, by professional organizations all over the country. So what we have done is refer to course design as kind of the umbrella category. So when you think of a course, think about not only in the instructional materials, but all of the wraparound pieces that go with it. So the specific scope and sequence that might be appropriate for your school district, the assessments, the teacher professional learning, the activities. So all of those pieces we're going to call course design. And then for instructional materials, we're talking specifically about those learning resources that students need to learn facts, skills, or cognitive processes. These learning materials need to be aligned to state standards. And as is called out in WSSDA policy, there are actually 5 different kinds of instructional materials. We're just going to be talking about primarily the core instructional material, which is what your school district will adopt and implement with all the students in the district. And I'll touch briefly on supplemental resources as well. to navigate to the instructional material toolkit that has all of this information, you can do it a few ways. When you go to the OSPI website, you can certainly type in instructional materials in the toolbar on the main page. You can also navigate to the student success portion of the website and look for course design and instructional materials, and that will get you to the toolkit. You can also use a direct link, and I just posted it in the chat window. You have a copy of the slide deck. I've linked to all of these resources, so you'll find that information at the end of the PDF file. So you'll have live links to all of the resources that I'm talking about today. Oh, my computer started to freeze. There we go. So let's talk about the toolkit specifically. And what this resource does is really outline a cyclical strategy for taking a look at courses. Just think of it as a checkup for your course design throughout the school district. And we certainly recommend that you do this, if not every year, then at least every other year. Keep in mind that this is in no means intended for you to adopt new instructional materials every year or every other year. Really, this is kind of a maintenance checkup to see how the materials you have are working, how they're implemented. Are there any supplements that need to be added? Are there any tweaks that need to be made? And so this is really the cycle that we suggest folks follow, rather than waiting every 7 to 10 to 15 years to take a look at instructional materials and how they're being implemented in your district. In some cases, we realize that school districts absolutely know that they need a new set of core instructional materials for one or more of their courses. In those instances, we have a couple of kind of pared down versions of the toolkit that are specific to a content area. We have Appendix A and B. A is in the case of a mathematics core instructional material adoption. B is for English language arts. We will be certainly working on other content areas as well, but these kind of walk you through the toolkit with the lens of a particular content area in mind. And so all of the references to review tools and to other strategies are specific to that content area. So the first phase is really identifying the parameters, understanding the district goals, and gathering resources. So in the toolkit, we have listed all state laws that are related to instructional material policy. We have links to all the learning standards and all of the guidance documents that go along with those standards. We certainly have suggestions on district policies that you might want to take a look at. And we certainly also reference the WSSDA model policy for course design, selection, and adoption of instructional materials. In the next section, we're talking about really understanding the existing course. Where are you now? Taking a look at data, as was mentioned earlier. So we have links to the OSPI state report card, to the Smarter Balanced interim assessments. We have several school districts that have provided examples of surveys that they use with their school districts to get qualitative data from teachers, from parents and caregivers, from students. And so all those pieces of information will help you take a look at where your district needs to be in terms of instructional materials and where they are now, and just kind of assess whether a core instructional materials adoption is necessary, or perhaps maybe you just need to add supplemental instructional materials to kind of augment current instruction, to expand things you're discussing, or to fill gaps that might be missing. In the case you don't need to do an entire new adoption of instructional materials, but you're just looking for supplemental resources, let me suggest our Washington OER Hub. This is our online library of supplemental instructional materials that have been created for Washington educators, by Washington educators, or curated for Washington educators, specifically because they meet our learning standards. Obviously, I'm not going to link to the video here, but that is included and you can access that so you can get an overview of the platform if you're interested. So let's say you have decided that the gap between where you currently are and where you would like to be is too great, and you really need to do an instructional materials adoption. This next section of the toolkit deals with how you're going to get there, how you're going to pull together an instructional materials review committee. What are some best practices in training that committee? What are some review instruments that you might utilize to assess whether a set of instructional materials is going to work for your district? We have links to reputable online sources for review of instructional materials, things like Ed Reports, which are really good tools to winnow down your choices so that you're not looking at the entire universe of instructional materials in your content area, but you can kind of narrow down the choices to maybe the 3 or 4 that might meet the needs of your district. This is just a quick screenshot of some of the review tools that we have embedded in the toolkit. So one thing you'll find is our screening for biased content in instructional materials. This is something that will need to happen in all core instructional materials options. You don't need to use this tool, but this is a suggestion for things to look at when you are analyzing the materials for the absence of stereotype or bias and the inclusion of diverse and multiple perspectives and things like that. You also might find, well, not might, you will also find guidance on supplemental instructional material review in there as well. I see my time is running short, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. The last phase really deals with once you've made changes and you have adopted a set of instructional materials, are they doing what you want them to do? So this discusses implementation strategies and provides some support resources and professional learning options for educators. Starting in the 25-26 school year, there are some changes that are legislatively mandated to district model policies. I won't go into those in depth, but I've outlined a couple of those changes here in the slide deck, which you have access to. Marissa's touched on a few of these before. The addition of the requirement of parent involvement on instructional materials committee, the outline of complaint processes, both for core instructional material and for supplemental instructional material, which importantly, in this particular case, the legislature has included library materials in the definition of supplemental just for this particular piece as well. We are currently embarking on a rulemaking process, and there will be more guidance around this particular bill coming out shortly. Quickly, some upcoming opportunities that you might be interested in. We have some webinars that anyone is welcome to attend that talk about the supplemental resources that are available on our Washington OER Hub. We have an opportunity to apply to be a reviewer, and this is geared towards anyone. This is parents, district members, educators, students, community groups. So that will be available soon, and we will be sure to share the link with WSSDA so that can go out to the community as well. And one last note, the period for public comment on the new learning standards revisions is currently open. There is a link here that deals with that. It's open until September 13th. So if you would like to see the drafts and provide your comments or share that with your partners, please feel free to do that as well. I know that that was a flurry of information. Again, you have links here to all of the resources that I mentioned, as well as my email address. So if we don't get any questions answered today, feel free to reach out with additional comments. And that is it for me, Marissa.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Yeah, there is a lot of really great info. You shared a lot of great information, but skimmed the surface on issue areas that I know our members could do some deep dives on. I'm also curious from our own membership. I'm not familiar with how any of our school boards have utilized some of these materials that are readily available for local decision-making processes. It would be really cool. We won't be able to get to it today, but if any of you have used these materials or materials like them to make local decisions around your curriculum selection, I'd sure be interested in learning about that so we can highlight that and help other school boards utilize those practices to help make their processes more effective and efficient as well. There was a question not related to your content per se, Barbara, just about the materials being made available. And Barbara has shared, as well as Jennifer shared their materials with me, and we will be posting those materials to the WSSDA website for the General Assembly resources. And in the meantime, if you just email me, I can respond to your email as with some attachments as well, if you'd like them sooner rather than later. It takes a little bit of time to post recordings and resources to our website. So if you need it more readily, feel free to email me, and I'm happy to do that.
And Marissa, if I can just type in one more quick thing too, I think it's important to note that OSPI is assisting WSSDA in updating their model policy with regard to the selection, adoption of instructional materials to include all the new legislation that was just passed that has an impact on that. So that is currently in the process, and I think that's important to call out.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. Yes, it's a very important partnership for sure. Okay, with that, I just have a few closing reminders. I have gotten quite a few questions from folks in the field wondering about day of or second day of General Assembly. And I just wanted to share this draft schedule with all of you with the huge caveat that it really just depends and is totally subject to change. What won't change is that on both Friday, September 20th and Saturday, September 21st, General Assembly discussion and voting will begin starting at 9 a.m. on both days. On Friday, September 20th, the first hour from 8 to 9 a.m. will give you an opportunity to test your technology, log in. We hope you'll log in early so that you can be sure your voting credentials work. And you'll have the opportunity with Lumi, who's the organization that runs the voting platform, to do a couple test votes that are not consequential to our actual WSSDA platform, but just some practice votes yourself. So if you sign in early, you'll get a chance to test your tech and do some practice. You'll also hear from myself and Mike Hoover about how WSSDA member adopted positions inform advocacy work. And then also how Robert's Rules of Order and Parliamentary Procedure could impact the way you participate in General Assembly for both Friday and Saturday. Call to order will be at 9 a.m. on Friday, and as many position proposals will be discussed and voted on until 5 p.m. That night, and at 5 p.m. the meeting will recess until the next day when it starts officially at 9 a.m. but you can log in at 8:30 again just to be sure that your technology is working. 9 a.m. It will reconvene and continue from wherever it left off. So these are just guesses on how far we might get on Friday, but all of that depends on the length of debate for each proposal. So you get 5 minutes for pro, 5 minutes for con for each proposal. In some cases, that's utilized fully. And in other cases, it's not utilized very extensively at all. So it's possible we'll get done earlier, but you should count on being there on Saturday, at least for some time. We predicted maybe 2 o'clock things might conclude, but there have been years past. I think last year we finished around 1, and previous years it's gone until 7 or 8 p.m. So again, it largely depends on the extent of deliberations or debate / discussion. So I'm sharing this with you just as a subject to change, but be sure you're there by 9 a.m. on both Friday and Saturday, and 5 o'clock on Friday we will recess and then reconvene on Saturday to continue all the proposals have been voted on, essentially. So let's see. Question about what is WSSDA doing to get full participation in assembly? I mean, we work hard every year to communicate regularly and often. We do that through our member updates. We do that through hosting weekly webinars like this one. As you may be aware, this is a series of 5, so this is the second of 5. I have asked your elected members of the Legislative and Resolutions Committee to be communicating out to their fellow school directors within each director area, reminding them of the importance to register your voting delegate. We are posting these recordings on the WSSDA YouTube page. So doing all that we can to encourage you, it's really in your hands. If your board has not identified a voting delegate, registration is wide open and ready to go. And if your neighboring school boards haven't registered a voting delegate, I highly encourage you to reach out to them and encourage that they do so. So if there's anything else you can think of, by golly, we're open to more ideas about spreading the word, but we utilize social media, e-clippings, our weekly member updates, our webinars, and our full team to encourage you to do what you need to do to identify your voting delegate and register them accordingly. So it's a great question. At this point, as of this morning, we had 75 voting delegates registered. That is officially quorum. Last year, we had 130 plus voting delegates who had registered. So we haven't yet, and that was our highest ever. So we have yet to reach our record. But with 2 weeks until tomorrow left to go, I'm encouraged that we've already established a quorum, so long as all those folks who have registered show up the day of. But would love to see us beat last year's record. So we'd be looking at doubling the number of voting delegates that we have now. So hope that you can join us. The last thing I wanted to share with you, I know that we're over time. I just wanted to remind you that there will be 3 more of these trainings in between now and actual General Assembly. Next Tuesday, we'll talk about some of the position proposals around funding and allocations. Then next Thursday, September 12th, we'll talk about some of the topics in the learning and staffing categories. Then on Tuesday, September 17th, we will have our colleagues from LUMI to walk you through the technology elements of General Assembly. If you've participated previously, it's the same platform that we've used since we've done any version of a virtual General Assembly. This year is hybrid, so you can either join virtually or in person, but the LUMI platform will be used for everyone. So everyone votes the same way, whether they're there in person or remotely. We'll also have the opportunity to talk a little bit about Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure. Mike will join us on the 17th. And then the morning of the day of the event, like I mentioned before, we'll do some additional training. It'll be somewhat repetitive to what happens on the 17th, but we want to be sure we provide as many opportunities to prepare you as possible. So we have extended, we're a little over time, but I do see that there are some questions. One of the questions was, if you're attending in person, do you need to bring a laptop? You could bring a laptop, an iPad, or use your cell phone to vote if you are there in person. If you are joining remotely, you have to have a laptop because the functionality from remote users is both the voting platform and Zoom. And so you'll need a laptop that allows for both. But if you're there in person, because you'll be able to see the proceedings going on, you can vote simply on your cell phone. And then how do you get registered on the WSSDA website? Let me just go ahead and take you there. If your school board has not yet registered, you will be going to WSSDA.org, and under training and events, you're going to General Assembly. And then here you'll see this big word that says registration and a purple button that says register. So that's the button that you would click. And you do not need to register if you are simply observing. Registration is for voting delegates. either virtual or in person. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for being here. I want to honor your time. We're 5 minutes over, but if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is m.rathbone@wasda.org. It's in the chat, and I'm available to you if you need. Thanks so much. Hope to see you here next Tuesday. Bye-bye.